Presented exclusively by Mother's Polish.
Welcome back to an Everything's Bigger in Texas edition of the Slipstream Podcast, where we actually have Brad Pitt on the line as a guest tonight on the show. Hey, Brad. I'm just kidding. But it did seem like he was everywhere this weekend in Austin, Texas for the United States Grand Prix at the Circuit of Americas. And lucky for us, we have a full grid in the house tonight for this week's episode. I know we talked about rumors last week. We're swirling throughout our paddock that, Matt, you missed last week because you were negotiating your Jolly Rancher sponsorship. So what's the word? Good news? Do we have bottomless Jolly Ranchers? What's going on?
Bottomless Jolly Ranchers. I've been eating them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Big sour apple and watermelon guy over here.
I was going to say, you can't go wrong with watermelon and basically any candy. That's my opinion. So congrats, buddy. We're happy for you.
Thank you.
So as most of you know, we are a U.S.-based podcast. So it was great to have Formula One here in our figurative backyard and in the city where our boy Sten was actually conceived. So Sten, do you want to get into that story for a second?
I think it was Thanksgiving. August birthday makes sense. I don't know.
I'm sure Uncle Hal gave you more details than that, but we'll get into that on a different, maybe exclusive podcast one day. So only kidding, but what an incredible weekend of Formula One in Austin, Texas, with what was said to be a record-breaking attendance of over 400 or 440,000 people attending events over the 3-day weekend. Not to mention, we actually had some really incredibly exciting racing. So we'll get into all of that. But to kick off the episode for this week, let's talk a little bit about the off-the-track news. And we won't beat the dead horse too bad because I know it's been maybe over talked about for the last couple of weeks with all the rumors and drama swirling around the cost cap. But basically, the latest in the cost cap is we still don't know. So, Cole, I know you may have some opinions on the FIA continuing to kick the can down the road, but what's the latest?
So they're gonna just wait until the off season, is my opinion. So, the Red Bull founder passed away a handful of days ago, and I think out of respect for him, the FIA and Red Bull have agreed to postpone talks until a later date. They said they'll pick talks up again next week, but there's no way that they're going to announce anything to us. They're going to try to sweep it under the rug as long as they can, but yeah, that's kind of as to be expected with the FIA as of recently.
Yeah, I know. I think it was Friday. There was a lot of rumors that Red Bull was supposed to have a press conference and it was canceled. And then Christian met with the FIA president and that there was some sort of disagreement around sort of the offer that they were given. So I think one thing that's fascinating about this whole scenario is that, you know, there is obviously a process and we don't know everything that goes on as a part of that process. But it seemed like the FIA offered a punishment to Red Bull. And Red Bull has pushed back on that punishment, which just feels weird to me. It feels like the FIA should be the one just handing down the punishment. There should be no negotiation. So yeah, we still don't know. There's obviously a lot of rumors that continue to swirl around the paddock, including, you know, things like 25% reduction in wind tunnel time and all that fun stuff. So yeah, perhaps a little bit out of respect to Dietrich to postpone the announcement. But it also feels a little bit like they just don't want to come out and say what it is, or they're not willing to make the hard decision. So more to come on that.
Apparently, there were 6 different options for what their punishment was going to be that they were going to be going through to be considered. I'm not sure how that works exactly, right? Like, yes, hand down the punishment, but apparently they're choosing between 6 options of what it will be.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, us on the podcast, we all have children. It'd be like, hey, kid, you got to go to timeout. And they're like, well, are we talking 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes? Let's negotiate here, parent. That's not really how it should be, right? It's like, hey, you messed up. We're the governing body. Here's the penalty. But unfortunately, it's not quite that cut and dry. And we still don't know what the end result is of that. So we won't continue to beat this dead horse. I know we've talked about it. The world of Formula One has talked about it. One day we will know, and one day we'll be happy to talk about what the ultimate penalty, if there is one, for Red Bull. So in other news, off the track, or sort of on the track, that was announced fittingly here at Austin, Texas, is an announcement for the second seat at Williams. And it has been announced that Logan Seargant will be the Williams number 2 driver for 2023 if he obtains his super license for next year. So, Matt, how close is he, and what does he need to do to actually get his super license for 2023?
So you need 40 points for a FIA super license to be able to drive in F1. And I think he's 12 shy. 12, 13 shy, somewhere around there. He's currently in F2. F2 obviously gives you super license points. He is third in those standings. There's 2 races left, both in Abu. There's a short race and then the full race. He needs to finish either 5th. If he finishes 5th, then he automatically gets it. Nothing else matters. He can finish 6th and still get in. He has to finish the full season, and he cannot take any penalty points. Maybe he can take 2, but that's it. So it seems like a decent chance that he can get it, but he's also only 9 points ahead of 6th place in F2, even though he's third. 9 points with 2 races left is he DNFs in one of them. There could be your swing right there. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in these final 2 races in a couple of weeks to see if he can get in there. First American driver that would be on the grid since Alexander Rossi in 2015, and he'd be the first full-time driver since Scott Speed, American driver since Scott Speed in 2007, I believe. So exciting from this end of the world.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously timely news being that Formula One was here in America, and it looks like we're going to have our first full-time Formula One driver from America with Logan Seargant joining Williams for next year. So that's definitely exciting news. So in terms of sort of the driver seat carousel that, Cole, I know you love, we're essentially down to 1 open seat for 2023. And we still don't know the open or the resolution that's ultimately going to happen with Mick or Nico or whoever's going to be in that second Haas seat, right? So taking a question from one of our fans, Zachatron, which, his question almost leads us to the answer, but should Mick look towards other teams for 2023 or stay with Haas until he finds a better deal?
Where's he going to go? Like, there's no seats available left for this season. I think next season in 24, an Alfa Romeo seat may be available, which will potentially be Audi, or that's 26. But no, he's got nowhere else to go. He's going to lose that seat. Hopefully they give it to the Hulk. I hate it for him, but they made it very clear. You need to score points to keep your seat. You don't score, you don't keep. He's not scoring. Hulk was in attendance, so glad to see him around. I think he got some laps in a car. I don't know who he was driving for, but yeah, hopefully Hulk gets that seat next year. God bless Mick, but he's not getting a ride.
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer Zachatron's question directly, I mean, there are no other options except Haas, and it sounds like, that may not actually be an option. I'm sure it's not over because there's been no official announcement, and I think he had a decent race today. He obviously didn't score any points, which definitely hurts his chances. So we'll see. I think the other kind of exciting thing, we hinted, and I know, Cole, you hinted at this, that this was coming last week, but Haas did have a big announcement this week that they have a title sponsor beginning in 2023 with MoneyGram. So definitely good news for Haas. I know they've had their issues with Rich Energy and the Mazepin family over the last couple of years as their sort of main sponsors and pulling money out from under them when they weren't expecting it. So definitely some positive news there. So moving into sort of race weekend, there's a lot of rookie drivers in free practice 1. We had a tire test in practice 2. So it felt a little different than sort of a normal practice weekend. So we can just jump straight into qualifying. Pretty fun qualifying. I know that there were a few grid penalties between Checo and Joe and Ocon with a pit lane start, but a pretty close qualifying with ultimately Carlos Sainz getting pole ahead of Charles and Max. Personally, I'm a little surprised to not see Max get on the pole. So Stin, over to you. I don't know if you have any reasons for that. Is this a track that fit the Ferrari a little bit better than Red Bull? Did Red Bull tone it down because they've already won? What do you think happened there?
I think generally the Ferrari has been better over a one lap pace all season, roughly. Red Bull is better to heat up the tires, better to maintain the tires, but Ferrari has had 13 or 14 poles, I would think. So it's not like a shock by any means.
Yeah, I don't know the exact stat, but I saw it the other day that basically Ferrari has something like 9 poles and 4 wins, and Red Bull has 7 poles and 14 wins. So, yeah, it certainly seems like Ferrari continues their streak of a quick one-lap car, but maybe not the car on race day. But given the grid penalties, there was a pretty exciting front row between Carlos starting P1 on pole with Max aside him in P2, followed in the second row by both Mercedes with Lewis and George, P3 and P4. But one thing, that I didn't get to look into too much detail over the weekend, but what happened with Joe? He actually had a great qualifying, looked like he was through to Q3, but he ultimately had a lap time deleted, so he didn't get through to Q3. And there was a lot of commentary and basically pictures, videos, side-by-side photos on social media that looked like it was either Checo or Max had the exact same issue in the exact same corner, but did not have their time deleted. So what happened? Did Joe get screwed or what?
I think there's just inconsistency in the stewarding. I think, didn't Checo get a lap deleted in Hungary or somewhere that was deleted and then shouldn't have been deleted? I feel like there needs to be some type of steward or marshal that watches that POV of those. What was it? I think they said turn 9, turn 12, turn 19 were really the big culprits here. And it's interesting that they let the drivers go in free practice. There's no warnings, there's no anything because it doesn't matter. But as soon as qualifying hits, if you cross the white line, it's lap time deleted or it's warnings in the race. So I don't know why one got overlooked in the other, but it needs to be more consistent regardless.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this last week. I think just generally speaking, I wish there was more consistency with the FIA. And Matt, I know you've had some strong opinions on maybe the lack of consistency within the FIA. So not sure if there's more to add there, but it seemed like a little bit of a bad break for Joe, who, we've all been sort of desperately hoping he has a clean weekend, no issues with the car, no DNFs, etc. And it seemed like he put it together in a track that I don't know if he's ever been on, and ultimately kind of got the bad end of a deal there with the FIA's decision.
Yeah, I was pumped for him whenever it looked like he was getting into Q3. I think he's better than what the car has given him this year. So, and I think he showed it on that lap. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with what the FIA did on his part. I mean, he crossed the line, deleted his lap. There's no issue with that. But when Max did it, or another, and if there was another one that did it and it doesn't, it just makes it seem it's picking and whether it's picking and choosing, or you're not doing it correctly, or you're not paying attention to details. It's just that it's a microcosm of the FIA in one turn where they just can't seem to get it right at any point this year. You're seeing it with the cost cap issues. We've seen it on other deleted laps. We're seeing it when we find out we were having to wait 30 minutes after a race if Checo won it or not. Somebody's got to figure it out. And we thought the Massey thing was bad, and it was probably the biggest blunder in F1 and all that. But it's still continuing to go on throughout this whole season, and nothing as big as last year, but it's just one thing after another that just doesn't seem on point with them.
For me, one of the bigger frustrations there is I feel like it's a problem when, the FIA and Formula One and the race director, they should have all of the footage at their fingertips, right? We're only able to see what's broadcast and shown to us. And when people on social media within 5 minutes are basically like, here's Joe's corner and here's Checo or Max's corner, and they're the same, but only one got a penalty. It's like, we shouldn't be able to armchair quarterback this better than they are doing it like in the race control room, right? Like why is that a thing? Like it just feels like something that should be pretty well ironed out. They do this every race weekend, right? So like why are we able to find inconsistencies where they seem to not be able to? That's a frustration to me.
And I will say one thing. It doesn't help their case that it's Max that is the other car that was given the side by side. Because like anything in sports, if you're penalizing a lower person and letting the champion and whoever walk, it looks like you're playing favorites. So it doesn't help the FIA because it was Max. If it was Latifi who did it and didn't get his lap penalty, which wouldn't have mattered, he was going to be 20th no matter what. But if it was Latifi who exceeded and they didn't do it, I don't think anybody would really care or pay attention to it. It's just that it seems like this year, it's Max this time, Checo before, the cost cap keeps getting punted down, and hopefully somebody forgets when it's mid-February when we find out. And it doesn't help their cause that it's always a Red Bull or Mercedes or whatever issue.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going as far as saying that the conspiracy is in and the FIA is on Red Bull's side, but at least it gives the perception that all of these decisions, whether it's Checo in Singapore only getting a 5-second instead of a 10-second, Max getting the benefit here where Joe didn't, and a few other decisions, whether or not it's whatever happens with cost cap, it seems to be like a lot of the decisions are rolling Red Bull's way, and maybe that's just coincidence, and maybe that's just good fortune. But it doesn't help your cause. One interesting thing, and I didn't read the whole report, but one of the things that came out of the whole Michael Massey debacle in Abu Dhabi was that there was rotating race directors across race weekends. And ironically, after the Japanese Grand Prix and the issue with the crane on the track with Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly and all that stuff, they have ended their race rotation, and they actually let, I don't know if fired's the right word, but they let go the race director who was in charge of the Japanese Grand Prix after the report of those issues that happened with the crane on the track. So yeah, I mean, obviously not an ideal situation all around. It doesn't seem like race director has really been the problem this year, but yeah, not a good look for Formula One, unfortunately, again. So moving into the actual race, it was actually a super exciting race. There was a lot of things that happened throughout the race that I know had me on the edge of my seat. Max got off to a hot start in turn one, and Cole, I'd love your opinion on this. Carlos being on pole and looking like Ferrari had a pretty strong car at this track, got off to a little bit of a slow start. Max got him in turn one, and then George ultimately hit him and spun him. So what happened there?
Exactly that. Slow start. He comes a little wide coming into turn one, and as he's trying to get a little momentum and speed coming out of one, George is there. George took a short angle. Carlos took a wide angle, and they kind of met in the middle. Absolutely a lap one, turn one racing incident. Hate it for Carlos. I think I had him winning my forecast predictions this week. Super disappointed for Ferrari again, but George got a 5-second penalty for it and ruined Carlos's day. So I'm not sure if the penalty equals the same punishment, but yeah, rough go for Ferrari again. Oh, for Carlos again.
Yeah, I think that makes back-to-back race weekends where Carlos doesn't finish lap one at DNFs. So I can't imagine what that feels like to spend however many weeks or days in the simulator, all the time at the track and practice, and then it's over in 10 seconds.
Doesn't he have 4 lap one DNFs with 6 total DNFs for the year? It was Imola and I think Australia was like first, second, third lap. It was early in the race. But yeah, he's definitely not helping himself with some of the decisions he's making. But Max and George were tight inside, so late apex, slower speed. Carlos was wide, was able to take more speed through the turn. Carlos got backed up by Max because Max took a really tight turn. That's just how the entries of that turn happened. And George also locked up. You didn't see it on his POV, but you saw it from, I think, Lando's POV. George locked up for 10, 15 feet. So I know that Carlos did turn in on a line that George wasn't expecting, but George didn't have full control of the car regardless.
Yeah, so obviously an unfortunate start for Sainz. I mean, to go from pole to DNF within 10 seconds is less than the ideal outcome. So before we get into sort of the rest of the details, let's just do a one-sentence race review. And I can start, and I know we'll get into this, but I guess mine will be, I really wanted Lewis to continue his win streak, and I thought it was going to happen, and it was oh so close. Cole, what about you?
Poor Aston Martin. Had a great qualifying, couldn't put it together in the race. We'll get into their race later, but poor Aston Martin.
Matt, what about you?
America, baby. U.S., Texas, just flags as big as the entire track, blocking views. I mean, horses, cowboy hats. What a time, man. Just brisket cooking in the stands.
Don't forget about Ricardo's horse named Blue, I think. What did he call him? Was it Blue?
Yeah,
you're my boy Blue.
I mean, it's what a great time. I mean, you're in Texas, you're not in the Netherlands, you're not worried about smoke flares. You're worrying about brisket and pulled pork smoke blocking and just making everybody in a coma, food coma at that thing. It was, give me some more American races. Homer for the Americans right here, baby.
All right, Sten, what's yours?
Alonso performs wheelie in race to finish in the points, to then, breaking news, receive a penalty to no longer receive points.
Wait, so he didn't finish 7th?
He did, but after the race finished, Haas filed a complaint to the FIA regarding Red Bull and Alpine. Most likely because K-Mag has received a couple of black and orange flags, bringing him into the pits when he didn't want to be. And Alonso lost a mirror while overtaking someone after the accident. And Checo lost an end plate. It looks like, again, conspiracy or not, the Red Bull penalty was overlooked. The end plate went off to the side. There was no issue. But Alonso was given a 10-second stop and go penalty after the race, which adds 20-second pit time. So it's a 30-second overall penalty. So he was 55 seconds off of the lead in 7th place. He finished 85 seconds off the lead in 15th place.
Wow.
Yeah, that's wild.
I mean,
that's unbelievable.
I mean, for those a little bit behind the scenes. So we're obviously here in the US. So, we watched it somewhat in real time. I think some of us, finished the race an hour ago. And so, we watched the race, we cut it off, we come down here, prep for the podcast, and think we've got this whole section about talking about Alonso doing a wheelie rear end. So we can fast forward to that for a second just to set the stage here, right? Max got a hot start. Sainz spun. That was first issue. Then there was the Bottas beached it in turn 19, which caused a safety car, right? And And so that ultimately led to the field getting jumbled together, and they restarted after the Bottas safety car. And there was what looked like a massive crash between Lance Stroll and Alonso, where Alonso came up all over the back of him. There was it looked like a little tweak left from Stroll really late, which caused Alonso to almost do a backflip, but he definitely did a double wheelie, hit the wall, and somehow finished the race. Which I was going to give all the credit in the world to a guy like Alonso going through all of that and finishing P7. But now there's some breaking news that he's 85 seconds off the lead and 15th. So, wow.
And Stroll received a 3-place grid penalty at the next race for causing that collision.
How angry is Lawrence Stroll about all that?
Well, the one thing too that I think we probably all noticed this is that Lance and Alonso are teammates next year. I mean, how's that first meeting going to go as new teammates?
Lance did say post-race interview that he said there was a lot of room on the left side. I left a lot of room. So he said that Fernando has to take some of the blame, but I mean, what's Fernando going to say? They've already paid him a ridiculous amount of money, and Lawrence he's the owner and he's Lance's dad. So what are you going to say to him?
But Matt, go ahead. I'll interject afterwards.
I was going to honestly say what you've said in the past. Like, that's a typical Lance Stroll answer. He's always pointing the finger at somebody else. I left them a lot of room. And you can see from the camera over top, he jerks the wheel left at the last second. I mean,
he really did, man. It was pretty obvious.
Like, I know Alonso said that, I should have moved earlier, but I also didn't expect him to move into where I was moving. So, there was plenty of room on the left side of the track, but Lance, you didn't have to eat up an extra 2 or 3 feet just to do it. There was plenty of room on the right side of the track that you could have moved over a little bit. Super dangerous. And he got a couple penalty points for it too.
I mean, when it happened, so when they showed the replay, I honestly thought that Alonso wasn't making it anyway. I mean, he was super close when he decided to turn left. Yeah, I mean, maybe he would have. Stroll didn't give him any room. I do think it's funny now that Sten, with your breaking news, Alpine's been doing since the end of the race, Brady, what you've been doing. And so Alpine posted and on Instagram, and Fernando has reposted or whatever, started P14, sent flying, lost the front wing, drove on 2 wheels, finished P7, Fernando Alonso, everybody. And then it's actually really P15. So
when the wheelie came up, it really did feel like California Highway, right? When you were a kid and you double stomp the gas and the whole thing would lift up. I mean, he was so high. It'll be a great meme. He was so high up in the air.
Cruising USA. Yes.
Cruising USA. Thank you.
I've never seen the underside of a car. Never mind. Joe, we've seen the underside of the car with Joe, but you don't see it in a race. It was unbelievable.
I was really grateful. So when you look at the angle, he was close to a Marshall post, and it was concrete, or not concrete, but the metal barriers there, and he hit 15 or 20 feet past where it started curving back in, because they always angle those to have the marshals be able to drive straight on, and they back the vehicles off the track. He was 25, 30 feet away from hitting kind of like a Grosjean hit at a Marshall outpost that wouldn't have been the same outcome.
Yeah, it's kind of like that random notch in Singapore that I hit a few years back in F1, maybe in 2020. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there was a lot of miracles that happened in that whole situation. One was Alonso's car not doing a backflip. I mean, the wheelie was pretty cool, but probably wasn't that far away from doing a full-on backflip. 2 was, to your point, Sid, not doing any harm to any sort of Marshall area. 3 was the fact that how is that not a DNF? If you just compare that incident to the Sainz incident where he DNF'd after the first lap, he was able to continue and get back to the pits, but they rolled him in the garage and his race was over. He rear ends Stroll. He does a double wheelie, and that wheelie was like, it felt like multiple seconds. Like he was sliding on 2 wheels and then jolted down, hits the wall, somehow gets it back to the pits. When they showed him on the broadcast coming into pit lane and he wasn't retiring, and they basically just threw new tires on and let him go, I was like, how was this possible? Surely he was just going to do like one more lap and they would pull him in and retire the car. But he finished the race. How?
They measured the G's, right? The impacts or the force on it. I'm curious what he landed with. Lewis complained how his neck hurt. What race were they in? Belgium.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious what kind of force he landed with when he came down, because he was way up there.
I'm trying to rewatch.
It was crazy. It was a video game.
I'm trying to rewatch like the onboard footage. I'm like, I think it was Yuki. Someone went like Cole Trickle and just like floored it through the debris and past 2 or 3 people. I think it was Yuki. But again, I'm watching them turn into turn 11 right now. I'll confirm here in a couple of minutes.
I mean, he was Alonso whenever they played his radio, like he was out of breath. Like he was like panting, like trying to get the words out. I mean, just from the impact, probably. I mean, the fear he had to have had of whatever's going on in that 3 seconds of race time was something else.
Yeah, I think the other miracle that I didn't mention was the fact that no one T-boned Stroll. I mean, he's spinning on the fastest part of the track, and thankfully nobody hit him, and all the guys behind him were able to navigate that, because it was crazy. But this is the Slipstream podcast, and that shows the power of the Slipstream. Maybe it was a little too powerful, or more powerful than Alonso thought. Got a little too close, and a slight jerk left caused a pretty bad accident.
It was K-Mag. It was not Yuki. Yuki followed Gasly through. So K-Mag overtakes the 2 cars that are spinning. He then overtakes 3 other vehicles during that mayhem.
Yeah, I think another thing that was fascinating too is that I felt like they cleared it pretty quickly. I feel like that's been sort of a problem lately with, dating back to the Netherlands, where Bottas just pulls over in turn 1 and it took him like 4 laps to clear it. I feel like this was a pretty big accident with debris everywhere, multiple cars. There was no red flag. I mean, they were talking about on the broadcast that they thought it was going to bring out a red flag. It ultimately didn't. And they were able to continue the race after a couple laps. But so kudos to them. And maybe they pulled a few tractors down in Texas and got the cars off the track.
Yeah, I mean, the announcers were really saying that they thought it needed a red flag, and they just underestimated those American cleanup crews. They just don't. They just aren't used to what we do down here.
One last live update. K-Mag had to give the spots back because it was a double yellow. So after he makes the overtakes, you see a couple of cars drive past him in like turn 13.
And so that really kind of reshuffled the race. Unfortunate for Stroll. I mean, we'll get into what happened to Seb in a minute, but Aston was looking awesome. I think they were both in the top 5 for maybe the first 10 laps. Car obviously was performing pretty well around Circuit of Americas in Austin. So a bit unfortunate, not only to Stroll, but what happened to the whole team. One quick backtrack to Bottas for a second. So Cole, you may follow this more closely than anybody, and I feel a little bad saying this, but Bottas going from Mercedes to Alfa Romeo, and sure, he had a couple good weeks at the beginning of the season, but he seems so irrelevant now. I almost feel like he's more interested in his cycling career than his Formula One career right now. I mean, he's grown out the beard, he's grown his hair long. What's up with Valtteri, man?
I love it. I think he doesn't seem relevant because he's not right now. When you're in a slow car, you're never on TV. So, I mean, he's around for a couple more years, right? He's a fun character in the paddock. I can't wait for him to come back out to Colorado for another gravel bike race because 100% he's going to be there. Like, I know for a fact he's going to be there and he's going to win. So I'm just going to go hang out with him there. But no, I think he's just not relevant because he hardly finishes races, and Alfa Romeo has been garbage for the second half of the season, for 3/4 of the season.
Yeah, I know Matt's got a full collection of the Bottas river photos in his background, but
Bottas booty pics are not irrelevant these days. That man has a collection. Good for him.
hey, maybe he's looking to the future for his off the track career between cycling and river photos. But yeah, so that the massive crash on, I think it was lap 19 or 20, definitely reshuffled the race. They restarted. It gave it gave Charles a pretty good pit window to go ahead and throw on some new tires. I think he came back out in P4, which was crucial for him because he had the grid penalty and started a little bit further back in the field. One thing I wanted to highlight though, that second restart after the safety car, they had the helicopter shot over the S's at Coda. To me, there is no better shot than that helicopter shot in all of sports. That was unbelievable.
It puts it in a little perspective. You get like a basic idea how fast they're going when you see zoomed out the speed that they rip through those S's. It's incredible. I think Valtteri said that he got blown off by a gust, or he just said he lost the rear end. I think it was an assumption it was gust. Trying to navigate that track as windy as it looked, I bet was incredibly difficult, full tilt through those S's.
Are we going to talk about Gotifi losing it in the S's in like the 4th or 5th lap where Matt's Giovinazzi also did it in practice?
The tricky spot.
I thought you were going to go with Cole talking about rear ends and Valtteri Bottas. I thought that was pretty well done if it was unintentional. Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this after the last race. I mean, Latifi, man, just another issue. We all realize why his career is ending after 3 more races. So a little bit unfortunate to see. But yeah, that overhead shot of the S's was incredible. And I know we had our Slipstream League race at Coda last Wednesday. And, I feel like we don't race that track often enough. And the more we raced it last week and then watching it, like I just grew an appreciation for the track. Like the whole weekend, I didn't have a chance because things going on in the everyday life. I wanted to be behind the wheel of an F1 car in a video game in Coda all weekend. There's just I don't know, the track just grew on me so much this week.
When you're editing in like 20, 30 minutes, I'm going to jump on and do laps in Coda because I feel the exact same way.
Let's just hope there's no safety cars. I did have a little bit of PTSD today during the race when they showed the Aston Martin safety car come out of turn 1 and it wasn't moving. I had flashbacks to my little issue. But yeah, look, again, my fault. I'll own it. Why the safety car wasn't on the racing line, I'll never understand.
Brady, you were the leader, and what did you do during the safety car?
I passed the safety car.
Oh, okay.
And wait, what happened after you passed him?
Well, I yelled "what" and I got DQ'd. Yeah, look, it's on me. When I look back at the footage, it definitely said kind of whatever, it said catch the safety car cue and then stay behind the safety car as I was passing the safety car. But the safety car was basically on the rumble. It was not on the racing line. And so I was like, do I have to do a whole nother lap? And then, it gives you 1.5 seconds to basically get behind the safety car that's not moving. So yeah, I got DQ'd. I'm still not happy about it.
What position were you in when that happened?
I was finally leading the race.
And you had what kind of lead on everybody else?
I mean, before
it was pretty gross.
Yeah, other than Checo, I think I had a full pit cycle on everybody. So I finally was, racing like I feel like I can, and yep, screwed it up. So on me, a little PTSD. I'm still not over it. May never get over it. But anyways, back to the actual racing on the track. One other comment. This kind of relates to a couple points One, because I love Pierre Gasly, and two, he got penalized 5 seconds for being more than 10 car lengths behind, the car in front of him during the safety car. My bone to pick here isn't the fact they showed the replay, he was definitely more than 10 car lengths behind, but they decided this penalty within a lap or maybe 2 laps, gave him 5 seconds. It took them 3 hours to decide the same thing for Checo back in Singapore. It happened twice for Checo, and they only gave him 1 penalty. Like, again, back to the lack of consistency with the FIA. Just kind of ridiculous.
Christian must send good Christmas presents. That's all I can say.
It's got to be something. Yeah, we got back to racing. I believe we had Max in first with Lewis in second, which felt a little bit like last year. And I know they talked about that a little bit on the broadcast. Lewis ultimately came in for the undercut, I believe, on around lap 35 to undercut Max. So Max and Red Bull answered the next lap and brought Max in, and he actually had a horrible pit stop. I don't know how many seconds it was, but it was a horrible pit stop that ultimately gave not only Lewis the lead, but Charles the ability to get in front of Max. So that created quite some excitement around, the outcome of the race with about 20 laps left. With Lewis ultimately had to overtake, I think it was Checo and Vettel, who were on a different pit cycle than he was, but felt a little bit like old times. And Lewis had the lead with 15 laps left.
It felt like the Buffalo Wild Wings commercial, like someone just had the button to mess up Max's pit stop, because it made the race that much more exciting. Because without that mess up for Red Bull, the race is over. It's 10 seconds, 11 seconds. So thank God for the mess up from Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean, Max deserved to win the race. The pit stop was really the only thing that allowed it to be exciting at the end. Would y'all have gone hards with Lewis?
They didn't have another set of mediums.
There we go. All right, I didn't know that. That's why they had to do it. Okay.
They had 2 new sets of mediums. I've got 2 nuggets. So yeah, Max came out 11 second pit cycle. I think he came out 6 seconds behind Lewis and behind Charles. Ended up overtaking both of them and beating Lewis by 5 seconds. Lewis said, regardless of what was going to happen, Max was going to win that race. We were just fortunate enough to have Charles and Checo and really Sainz out of position in the first lap, which is what gave us the opportunity to really be racing. Second point, someone on Reddit, I don't know when this happened, I just saw a screenshot. If Max Verstappen wins this even after the wheel gun got stuck, I'm getting a tattoo.
Of what?
I don't know, but this post, apparently this person makes this post, people blow up about it, and I think his account has been deleted since he's made this post. So, pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I know ultimately, Max goes on to overtake Lewis, I think with 5 or 6 laps left. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I felt like, the Mercedes has always been pretty good on the hard tires, at least this season. Even when, before all the pit issues happened with Max, it felt like Lewis was at least keeping it closer than it seems like it has been throughout this season. So it absolutely, we love a good conspiracy on this podcast. I mean, maybe they messed up the front left wheel on purpose to kind of add some drama. I'm not going to lie. I really thought Lewis was going to get the win. Was definitely pulling for it. We talked a little bit about this on last week's podcast, but I appreciate sort of the history of sports in general. And, Lewis having a win in every season that he's raced in Formula One is pretty cool. And there's definitely a part of me, whether or not I'm a Lewis fan or not, that would just like to see that continue, especially because now it's not going to affect the outcome of anything. I mean, Max is world champion. Red Bull is constructors champion. It's just be cool to see him to see him do that and have that success. But, ultimately it wasn't meant to be.
I mean, if we want to go real American right now, I mean, if Lewis doesn't win a race this year, that'd be like the Undertaker losing his streak at WrestleMania. Like, we're going deep in the American sports playbook right now.
Which did happen.
Yeah, bummer.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of drama. I mean, even for a little while, it wasn't like Max was just immediately all over Lewis. It was a couple tenths here, a couple tenths there. And even the guys on the broadcast were, he needs to get within that 1 second for DRS. And as soon as he did, it was like, all right, it's over. Like Max is going to overtake him. And he made a good move into turn 11? Is it turn 11 after the long straight?
12. Yeah,
12.
He had DRS for the second half of the lap before, lap 49. Kept it within 8 tenths coming into the straightaway out of turn 11, and then one and done. Lewis, I think he said after the race in the post-race interview that Red Bull had like a 35 kph advantage when they had DRS, when Mercedes only had like a 22 kph when they had DRS. So the offset was like 8 to 12 kph at any given time with wings closed. So he said as soon as Max got within range, he knew it was going to be over. And he even admitted that he knew that Max was managing race pace the entire time in the first two stints just to extend the race out. He knew it was inevitable.
I mean, Max was going to win, and I've said it before, Max is inevitable. It's just he's Michael Myers. Halloween's coming up. He just tracks you down. You think it doesn't matter how far back he is, he just always gets there. I was really hoping Vettel was going to stay out one more lap, though. Vettel holds up Lewis for about a second and a half. Lewis gets around him, and then he pits the next lap. So before Max and Leclerc can get to him to hold him up, I was hoping for some of the old guys helping each other out, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that for a second because, Cole, I know you'll appreciate this. At one point, the top three were what? Seb, Hamilton, Max, which is 7-4 to 13 championships between the three of them. And Seb had a great race. I mean, look, I know that, I have a reputation as sort of a Seb hater, and it's not Seb the person. It's just, when it's over, it's over. Like, look at Tom Brady. They lost to the Panthers 21-3 today. I mean, dude's washed. But, I'll own it when I'm wrong. And Seb's been incredible the last 5 or 6 races, and today was no exception. He was great, and he and Stroll and Aston Martin's definitely come alive the last month or two of the season, and it was really cool to see him up front, even though he was on a little bit of a different pit cycle. But then, yeah, Cole, super slow pit stop for Seb, which ultimately changed his outcome, which we alluded to earlier, with just sort of an overall poor result for Aston Martin, almost to which was not their fault, unless you include their own pit crew for messing up.
Yeah, poor Seb. Y'all know I'm a Seb lover. Yeah, the pit stop. He lost. I think it was the front left wouldn't go on, or it got caught on the ground. But he lost so many positions. Like, he had to fight back. The end of his race was actually pretty spectacular, because he went from being, I want to say it was somewhere in like 5th or 6th, and then came out of the points 11, 12, 13, and then had to weasel his way back through, and ended up scoring. I mean, he finished 7th, but they started 5th and 10th. Lance lanced it, and Seb had an incredible race. I think he was even driver of the day, led a lap, driver of the day, big stuff for Seb.
Yeah, he led his 35th 100th lap, right?
Yeah. And Brady, you said he's done well over these last handful of races, and these last handful of races, I guess you would consider more on the driver skill end of the air instead of the air part of it, instead of just car. So maybe he isn't as washed as we think he is. He's done well in some more technical courses lately now that could be age and experience, but
yeah, I mean, I also wonder if he's coming to the realization that this is it, and he's only got a few more races to go, and you never want to have second thoughts when you're considering or have made the decision to retire, but I think he's giving other people in the sport of F1 second thoughts of whether or not they'd like to have him. I'm sure there's a lot of constructors that would like to have him especially at how he's performed the last few weeks, and all credit to Seb and Aston Martin. I mean, they were in ninth in the constructors for, I don't know, 2/3 of the season, and all of a sudden they're in seventh, and they're 1 point behind Alfa Romeo. So, the way things are trending, they're going to ultimately end up sixth and look like they've got a pretty good trajectory going into 2023. But speaking of constructors, not only did Max get the win, which he obviously was crowned world champion in Japan a couple of weeks ago, but Red Bull has, as we all knew was going to happen, has closed out the Constructors' Championship for 2023. Now, whether or not there's a blemish on that from the cost cap issues, we still don't know. So instead of harping on that, Sten, I know you're our resident Red Bull guy. So first Constructors title for Red Bull since 2013? And frankly, it wasn't close. They've dominated this year.
Yeah, there've been, I think just in general, the last, when did they first win their Constructors? 2010, right? There have been two constructors who have won the championship. There have been four drivers who have won the championship in 12 years.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. I don't know if we know this, and I haven't really thought about this question until now, but why now? Why do you think Red Bull has been so successful this year, whereas Mercedes has dominated the last, 8? What's been the difference? Is it cost cap and kind of leveling that playing field? Is it resources? Is it Max? What is it?
I think it's probably a lot of different things. I think that the point that was brought up in 2021 was the change to the floor regulations to make it so the Red Bull car was just better. I'm trying to think of the term. I can't right now. But Red Bull, high rake. So a Red Bull, you couldn't use as much like side floor or whatever. Red Bull was just better at not losing downforce. And they were able to kind of take some of that learning from last year where they didn't have the dominant car, right? I think we would all agree to that. I think it was better at times. I think Mercedes was way better at the end of the year, but I think it's they've solved a lot of the reliability issues that they had with Renault. That's why they moved away from Renault to Honda. I think Honda has developed a pretty good package, and I think Red Bull has always kind of been somewhat relevant, but I think that like the cogs have finally like been turning at the right speed, and like things are really going well for them. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep it up. I would love it as a Red Bull fan, but only time will tell. And if Toto said something, post race that they've been kind of on the back foot because they've been getting like 14% less win time than Red Bull. So it'll be nice now that the last 18 months have expired that Mercedes will now have more time to develop their car than Red Bull will in the future. So again, I think I keep saying that someone from the midfield in the next 2 years will probably rise up to the front just because there is that offset scale of the better you do, the less time you get for the next year.
Yeah, and we just touched on it, and maybe Alonso knows a little bit more than we all do. Maybe it's Aston Martin. I mean, they're definitely trending in that direction, which leads us to sort of a couple other questions before we close out for the night. One of which was presented by one of our Instagram followers, the handle Formula1_828. Is Leclerc ready to be champion? What do we think? I guess another way to ask the same question: what's holding him back, if anything?
I'll go first. Ferrari's not ready to be champion, and Ferrari is holding him back.
I think what's holding him back mainly is that he's not Max Verstappen. Is essentially it.
Yeah, my one-word answer was going to be Max. Again, not to beat a dead horse, I talked about this a little bit last week, but the golf analogy is Phil Mickelson may have been the greatest golfer of all time if he didn't play against Tiger Woods. So we don't know that. We might not know that for a lot of these guys, whether it's Charles, Lando, George. I mean, the reality is they're in Max's era. And I mean, that just might be the short end of the stick because they may all be incredibly talented, maybe even historically good drivers, but they're facing Max, and Max isn't going anywhere.
Ferrari believes in Charles. I mean, they signed him to the longest contract in the history of F1 drivers, so they believe in him. I think he could potentially be a world champion, but you're at 100% absolutely accurate. Not in Max's era unless Ferrari gets their shit together, which is incredibly unlikely this season. And hopefully they've got something for next season because we've said it, I don't know, 1,000 times now on the podcast. If they get out of their own way, they'd be in much better shape. But they always put the brand first, and it seems to they always trip over it.
And he's been better since the break. And Ferrari, I mean, I think this was Ferrari's first DNF since the break. Maybe even
last week.
Japan.
You're right. A lot of stuff at the beginning of the season was his fault. So
yeah, I mean,
he's
his or the
figure
team
that out. I mean, a lot of mistakes were his issue, and you don't see that with Max. You don't see that with Lewis when it was his run. Ferrari's got to get better, but if he wants to be a champion, he's got to get better himself, which is probably going to happen, but with experience. But he's got to get there himself.
Yeah, man.
He's not even going to finish second in the standings. Checo will finish ahead of him this season. He's down 2 points from Charles, so I fully expect for Charles to finish third, or I mean, if George has a nice little string, potentially fourth. Because I don't know what's going to happen with Charles.
If we want to give a little bit of credit to Ferrari, I do feel like they haven't gotten in their own way as much second half of the season. I mean, that felt like the story of the first half, right? I mean, so many decisions, whether it was, telling Charles to stay out in Monaco when he was already in the pits, like things like that was so bad in the first half of the season. They've done a little better with that, but at the same time, it hasn't mattered. I mean, Matt, you've said this tonight. I mean, Max is inevitable. This year, Red Bull was inevitable. So kudos to them. The other stat that I want to touch on, I don't know if anyone has any other sort of historical perspective on this, but with Max's win, that's 13 this season, right? Which ties the all-time record for a single season. So he's got 3 left to break it. Does anyone here think that he won't break it?
No.
Yeah.
He's definitely breaking it.
I think he should win 2 of them.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Who is he tied with? Is it Schumacher and Vettel?
And the argument is percentage of races, yada yada yada, whatever. But I mean, Mexico has been Red Bull dominated. I feel like recently they just perform so well in that high altitude. Brazil has been a track that Max has been amazing at in his career. And Abu Dhabi, I feel like with the changes to how the first chicane was taken out in the first sector, there's 3 pretty long straightaways, and Red Bull is really fast.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. I can't remember who said it that thought Max would win like 97 races in a row. I think he probably wins the last 3. I mean, he's been that good, unless he just doesn't care because he and Red Bull have wrapped everything up. Last question I have before we wrap up for the night, though, Matt. I really want to get your opinion on something. What were your thoughts on special guest Tim Cook waving the checkered flag tonight?
It wasn't even a wave. He just dangled it out there. First off, I don't know why you have the Apple CEO waving the checkered flag in Texas. Doesn't make any sense. They're Silicon Valley. Get somebody in Texas. I don't know who it would be. I'm not a Texas fanatic. I don't know who it would be. But that man, I cannot say we're family friendly to an extent podcast. Cannot repeat my text message that I sent in the group message when I saw this. It was an abomination of a flag wave. Like when I'm thinking of a flag wave, the flag is up and down. It's going above the stick. It was just a limp dangle of a flag. listen, out of how great this weekend was for America and America F1, you ended it on possibly the worst note of the weekend. Never do I want to see Tim Cook near a racetrack ever again in my life.
I think his wave equates to a sweaty dead fish handshake, right? Just no one enjoys it.
I mean, a flaccid flag is basically what that was, and it was. Listen, I'm maybe this iPhone may be going in the river at the end of the night because I'm going Samsung from here on out. I don't want any more Apple products after that. What that man just ruined for us.
Let's not go that far. I'm a big Apple homer here. In defense of Tim Cook, Apple has a massive headquarters location in Austin. It looks like a big spaceship, which I know Seb would appreciate because it's fully sustainable. So that's probably why he was there. But, Matt, to your point, they clearly didn't pre-qualify his flag waving skills. And, we saw the result of that.
I don't even know if that man knew that there was a sport that raced cars. I don't know why he's there. Like, do you think that he was like, oh, like this is a thing? Get somebody cooler.
Matt, what if we missed the best? Like, right? What if when the first 4 cars passed, he was going so big that he hit himself in the face, or that he threw his shoulder out, or tennis elbow, or something, and he had to just take it easy for the rest of the time?
Fernando Alonso almost died on the track and still finished P7, and if that was the case, that man could have given a little extra effort.
But he didn't.
But he didn't. He didn't. He limp, it out there for the end of it, and I was irritated, to say the least.
I think you guys just figured out our next podcast topic because, again, good conspiracy, good fun conspiracy. I mean, we have McLaren, who's sponsored by Google and Android, right? And so they were like, look, show Tim Cook when he looks his absolute worst. So maybe it was a marketing gimmick by Google. We'll never know. We may have to break that down.
I have one more thing to add before we wrap up. For our picks, our top 10 picks that we do every week, I had Yuki in the points. Last week I had Gotifi in the points. Can we talk about just a straight long shot has paid out twice now?
I mean, that's.
We appreciate our friends at forecast_F1 on Instagram for helping us do that. Fun game for anyone who wants to make their own race predictions. We certainly do ours every week. I know Cole has been dominating the last couple of weeks. You may have had the highest score in history in Singapore. So we've got our work cut out for us, not only with the forecast_F1, but also with Grid Rivals. I haven't looked at my Grid Rivals tonight, but I have a feeling it's not good because I had Valtteri Bottas.
Cool.
Yeah, so not a good week for me on the track, but a great week for Formula One on the track. An incredible weekend. Lots to talk about, as always. We're excited that we have Mexico coming up next week, which we will look to preview. One last reminder, we are doing a giveaway on our Instagram, so at the Slipstream F1 pod. Just give us a like and add a couple of your Formula One buddies and enter to win for a chance to win a $100 gift card to the F1 shop. So as always, thanks for tuning in. Awesome weekend at COTA this weekend. High drama on the track and off the track as always. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll be back with our next episode for the Mexico Grand Prix. Thanks for tuning in.
America, baby.
USA.